Leadville, the podcast for the 100-mile mountain bike race, is stoked. We're proud to be supported by Floyd's of Leadville.
Yeah, and we have got a nice little care package of Floyd's of Leadville products en route to us right now, Hottie. We are going to have a lot to talk about in future episodes.
I see some yummy stuff here on the menu. I mean, I love, you know what? I may be one of the few people that actually likes like protein mix or my smoothie. So looking forward to some protein, vanilla, and chocolate recovery drink mix.
There is no shame in liking recovery drink mix. I like it myself. You know, I am really curious to find out whether and how having CBD in that 50 milligram CBD per serving in your post-recovery or in your recovery protein mix, you see how that affects things. And we've got some soft gels as well as tinctures on their way as well, 50 milligrams per pill. So we are, I'm guessing you and I are both going to be getting a little bit better sleep soon.
Yeah, and who doesn't love a good balm? You know, good rub down afterwards. So they've got products with CBD in them to rub on sore muscles. In different aromas too, which we love.
Yeah.
Lavender and cooling balm. Love all that stuff.
I am kind of new to the whole balm world, but I'm interested to try. But you know what I'm super excited about? We have also got seafoam tank tops on the way. I look awesome in seafoam.
You do?
Oh, and tank tops too. I am absolutely going to be rocking the seafoam tank top.
I'm a hoodie guy, actually. So, yeah, there's a surprising amount here, and not all just CBD either.
No, a fair amount of, I think practically everything but the seafoam tank top has CBD in it, but lots of applications for the heat up, the cool down balms, the arnica balm, the lavender balm. All of those also have other valuable practical aspects. So I'm excited to try stuff out. We're going to have a lot to talk about in our Floyd spots in the next couple of months.
You should check the tag on that tank top too. There may be CBD in it after all. You never know. Be sure to check out be sure to check out Floyd's of Leadville, our presenting sponsor, at floydsofleadville.com, and use the code FATTY at checkout for a 15% discount on your first 2 orders.
15% off on your seafoam Floyd's of Leadville tank top. Yeah.
3, 2, 1.
Leadville, the podcast for the 100-mile mountain bike race, presented by Floyd's of Leadville. It's season 2, episode 3 of the show that breaks down, builds up, gets you ready, and freaks you out for the highest and hardest one-day mountain bike race in the country.
We have got a remarkable guest this episode, Jeremiah Bishop, who last year took 5th overall in the 2018 Leadville 100, which is on its own no small achievement, but is 7 times more incredible when you consider that he did this after racing and winning the 6-day-long 2018 Breck Epic.
Yeah, that's 7 straight days of high-altitude mountain bike racing at a level most of us can't imagine. Fatty, everyone listening to this show knows now whether they've gotten into the LT100 by lottery or maybe are going to need to try and get in by qualifier or some other way. Maybe begging. I don't know what you can do besides a qualifier.
Charity.
Oh, there's the charity ride. Right, there's some other ways to get it. You could volunteer, of course, which we know about.
Yeah. Camp and Champs,
right.
Sure.
Or perhaps they're just going to get a head start on getting fast for the 2020 race.
Yeah, this episode is something that I wanted for myself, Hottie. I had a really fun and pretty successful 2018 race season, and I sort of rewarded myself by taking some time away from training, which turned into a lot of time away from training. Weirdly, though, when I slacked off on my exercise, I kept eating like I was training 20 hours a week. And that led more or less where you would expect it to.
Weirdly?
Well,
weirdly, you kept eating? And how much weight did you gain there, Fatty?
21 pounds.
You have the gift.
A gift, curse. I have a problem. Let's just say that. And this is the episode for everyone who, like me, has big goals for the summer, but sort of needs a kick in the butt to get themselves back on track.
So we're bringing two experts into this episode of the show for just that. We're welcoming Coach Jonathan Lee of TrainerRoad back for another season. He's got tips on what you should be doing right now to be ready in August. We're also welcoming Roxanne Vogel as the expert in our new ongoing nutrition segment. She's going to be talking us through reversing the damage you may have done to yourself over the holidays.
Hadi, you know that Roxanne is the sports nutritionist at GU Energy Labs, and you also know that I am a big fan of GU Roctane Gel. I've used it with great success in training and racing for I don't even know how many years. GU Roctane is, of course, one of the products you can get at our sponsor, The Feed, which we're incredibly excited to also welcome back for another season of this show.
Yeah, whether you are loading up on GU Roctane Gel or Morton, which Fatty and I used last year, or you're interested in trying a variety of products, The Feed is a great place to get whatever athlete nutrition you want at a great price.
Yeah, it's worth checking out the site because it's super easy to filter down to what you want, whether you're thinking in terms of category or brand or when you want to use something, or even by certain things you really want to have in the product, like you want it to be caffeinated, or you want it to be vegan, or you want it to be gluten-free, or whatever like that.
Here's another great thing about The Feed, because we all know how nutrition can be a little confusing. They have experts ready online to chat with you if you've got questions about what you are feeding yourself during your training or your racing. Also, our podcast listeners can get a great price on a pack laid out for Leadville racers. Go to thefeed.com/Leadville for our Leadville pack, and be sure to use the code Leadville15 for a 15% discount.
And one more thing, you can use that Leadville15 code for buying any amount of Morton at a 15% discount. I am going to be using that again during all of my races this year. It has turned out to be something that I really rely on.
Yeah, good stuff. The Morton drink is superior. Again, thefeed.com/Leadville, and use that code Leadville15 at checkout.
Hadi, I got to tell you about a brush with fame I had last summer while I was racing, the Breck Epic.
What would that be?
So in this race, it's all on single track, and in Colorado, it rains most every afternoon, as you know. And lots of hours on single track meant dirty bikes by the time you finished each stage. Anyway, some kids from a local school were doing a bike washing service every day as a fundraiser. And so one of the days I went over and brought my bike, figured I'd tip them 20, feel good about myself, get a clean bike. And it turns out this was a terrible idea. These kids were really well-intentioned, but they did not know what they were doing. Well, I sat and watched one of the kids turn his pressurized hose full blast onto my pedals, which was fun for him to watch as it turned my pedals into sort of a hydraulic pinwheel and blasted any semblance of grease right out of the bearings. And so I rushed over and gave the kid a $5 bill and told him, I'll take it from here.
Okay. Now, you said there was going to be a brush with fame here.
Yeah, I am. I do have a point, and I promise I will get to it. And this kid, after I relieved him of my bike, went to work on Jeremiah Bishop's bike in this sort of exact same way. You know, pressure hose, full blast on hubs and bearings. And yeah, you know, it makes you cringe even thinking about it. But while my main concern was rescuing my own bike, when he started doing this to Jeremiah's bike, he took a totally different approach. Jeremiah stopped this kid and then taught him really nicely, really patiently, the correct way to wash a mountain bike. It was inspiring to watch.
So this is the race leader of the Breck Epic. He's just finished up a punishing stage in a seriously difficult stage race. He's giving a free clinic now on bike care to a kid he's never met.
Yeah, and that really is Jeremiah in a nutshell. He has a 6-hour, 1-minute finish time in 2015, making him one of the top 5 fastest all-time finishers in Leadville. And he's just incredibly smart, incredibly generous about sharing what he knows. We're super lucky to have him on this episode of the podcast. Jeremiah Bishop, welcome to the Leadville podcast.
Thanks, Eldon. Thanks, Michael.
Now, you may not remember because we weren't riding in exactly the same place in the pack, but you and I had a couple of very similar race experiences last year, which is to say you and I both did Breck Epic and the Leadville 100 last year.
Oh, you mean the Leadville and Breck Epic did you? We both had the same experience. I remembered it that way. I felt like I had been tumbled in a rock conveyor belt or something.
Oh, yeah. Well, I would say perhaps the more important difference would be in where we wound up respectively. I managed to finish every day, although one of the days I wound up walking probably more than I rode. Wheeler really did roll all over me. But
yeah, that's a tough one.
You, on the other hand, won the overall in the Breck Epic with, I think, finishing around 20 minutes ahead of second place, and then went on to take 5th overall in the Leadville 100. How is that even possible? You know, with 6 days of hard racing in your legs to go and do that 7th day and turn in a performance of around 6.5 hours.
Yeah, it was not a bad time. That was enough for a course record about 7 years ago.
Yeah.
To put it in perspective, and I surely didn't think it was possible. And I'd say that some of the neater things I've been able to do are not when I perform to expectation, but rather when I just try and exceed expectation. And I think in this case, I wasn't actually planning on finishing Leadville. I had talked with the team manager, and I would never, really sign up for an event and plan on quitting an event normally. But the plan was, okay, you get to race Breck Epic, right? If you work for the Canyon Toe Peak factory, lead guys of, Albin Licata and Christian Heineck, and that sort of had framed a lot of my previous experience thinking about doing the double. And then this time, it was kind of like, let's just see what you got and let's see what you can do. And yeah, I wasn't really too sure about how it was going to end up. And yes, I felt really, really rough at times in the early parts of that race. And I figured I would just lead Albin out as long as I could into Columbine and try to set him up in a really good position and to help keep the gaps together. So it's quite technical at the front end of Leadville. It's a lot of fast racing, close to 17 miles an hour. And road tactics start to come into play at that speed. So my job was to keep it together in case the guys need a wheel, in case one of them goes through a derailleur. Boom, I'm right there. Give them a wheel. It's one of the unique dynamics that I'll really miss about racing for the world's #1 ultra endurance team. And in that, I really didn't expect to make it past Twin Lakes coming back. I thought, I could stop at the aid station, eat a hot dog, lay down on the ground, and then sort of figure it out after half an hour whether I was going to finish. But that was it was serendipitous because I did get dropped from the lead group, and then I got swept up by the chase group, which included Alex Grant, multi-time top 5 finisher, super rider at altitude, and my former teammate. And then I was like, I'll ride with Alex for a while. This is really cool. I haven't caught up with him much since the Mona V. Cannondale days. And so I rode with Alex, and, I was trading off pools, starting to get fluids and food back in me and getting my strength back. And then, I really started to turn back on a bit on the way back. And I thought, hey, I'm riding with my buddy. I'm back to the very basics of bike riding here. Riding with my old friend Alex. Yeah, I'm going to stick with Alex as long as I can. And that's the end story there. I was just trying to hang with my buddy for as long as I could.
Jeremiah, I'm glad you brought up road tactics because this year we'll have education first in the field. I don't know how many riders they're bringing, but obviously they bring a road mentality. What do you think their entry into the Leadville Trail 100 does to the front of the race, to you guys that race the front there?
Well, I think it'll be interesting for some of the other races that they've had on the calendar. I mean, I think if they were to have a very orchestrated, heavy-handed approach, it could change the outcome, but I don't think it'll change it a whole lot. I think when you look at Joe, and I started coaching Joe when he was 19. I know him quite well. He lives on the other side of the mountains for half the year in Warrenton, Virginia. I'm on the west side of the Blue Ridge Mountains in the Shenandoah Valley in Harrisonburg. And so Joe and I have ridden together hundreds of times. And, when he said he was coming out to Leadville, not last year, but the year before, I knew he was going to be serious firepower. I don't know how well his teammates ride off-road, and you have to keep it together. It's road tactics, and yes, there will definitely be some element of road tactics in the race. It'll get harder the more people they bring. If it's just him and Lachlan Morton, then yeah, there'll be some tactics on the way out. But after the big explosion happens on Columbine, you need to be on the exact terms with your you need to be on terms with your other rider for the tactics to come into play that much. So, yeah, I don't know. It depends on how many people they bring and how motivated they are.
And what's your personal objective for 2019, whether in Leadville or are you focusing more on Breck or some other stage race? What's your number one for 2019?
I want to shake it up. I mean, especially at my age in sports, a lot of people start to become satisfied with what they've done. And I want to look to doing new things and challenging myself in new ways. So I think it's going to be a really fun season. I'm going to be forging my own program with Canyon USA. I'll have some co-sponsors like Ergon, Orange Seal, Maxxis, Shimano, Ridge Supply. And yeah, I mean, these are going to be some really fun organic sponsors, folks that I've worked with for years or brands that I trust or really love. And primarily backed by Canyon. So it's a really exciting opportunity to help push the brand, get more people to check out the bikes and really get a chance to see the bikes. I think that's been something that's been a bit of a challenge with their consumer direct model. They have a headquarters in SoCal, and that's in Carlsbad, beautiful location that they just built. But I think when you look at the Canyon customer, they want to be able to see the bikes, feel the bikes, check out the difference between a large and a medium, for example. And this program that I'm working on for next year is going to do a bit of that. We'll have some expo bikes out at the races, and we're talking about having a few great opportunities for people to jump on the bikes and really, test them out. And so stay tuned to canyon.com for info on the demo tour. So that's the sort of cheap plug on, checking out some of the bikes. But we will be at Leadville. And yeah, it's going to be pretty interesting to do something a little different. I'm not going to spoil it, but, I've got a couple ideas on a very slightly different take on my Leadville 100. And I'll give you one hint. It's not riding a tandem.
You're riding a gravel bike, aren't you?
I didn't say that.
Jeremiah, I know you thought a lot about the record in past years. Albin Licata still owns it at just under 6 hours. What I wanted to ask you, though, is what do you think is possible there? What is the fastest you could see somebody going around the Leadville Trail 100 course?
We've talked about that a little bit over many pizza dinners. Me and the crew, we were talking about how do you have more people, better conditions. I certainly think that 545 is in the realm of feasible, or 640 is even in the realm of humanly possible. But yeah, I mean, in the current state of, how the races run, it's somewhat of a grassroots level of importance. It's not got $1 million prize purse or even a $100 prize purse. So we go because it's culturally important. That's why we go. Quite honestly, it's to be in front of the fans and to be amongst the fans. It's a really special event in that way. I think when I talked to our teammates, or you saw the posting at the end of the Canyon Toe Peak Factory Racing, announcement that the team was wrapping up this year, Sally Bingham was, really moved by the event, and the impression that it made on her was big, a really big, milestone in her career to win that event. And the same with Albin. For some reason, it's really just held a special spot for him as well. And so the importance that we put on that event, particularly in 2015, the amount of preparation that we put into that record attempt, the efforts to really look at, I really need a different word than marginal gains because I really despise that terminology. But anyway, the details. I'll just leave it at the details of going a little bit faster. We really had a thorough approach. Even the pacing strategy. If you saw our top tube notes with time splits and all of this, the stuff that we put together to really keep on an attack plan, it was something else. And I say we could go faster, but if you look at the times from the last 2 years, they're close to 15 minutes off.
Mm-hmm.
What was Grott's time last year?
Over 6, I know that. Yeah,
I think it was around 6:15 was the winning time last year.
Yeah, that's a little more typical. And Wells has a very fast time, in like 6:10 or so. But if you look at the second fastest race at all, that was also Albin's previous course record at just a hair over 6 hours. So it's interesting. It's a extremely challenging race, and the record itself is something of legend. I think it's something that we had some very, very good conditions, highly motivated group. And as I said I was talking to one of my racing colleagues and talking about that record just a little while ago. One of the things that we had there was this convergence of situations that made it for a magical record attempt, and that was World Championships took place at altitude that year, just a month earlier. And I think that can't be understated, the importance of the World Championships being at altitude prior to that. Big difference in everyone's preparation.
It really is remarkable. You look at the all-time fastest finishes, and it's like you get to the 7th or 8th place before you get any finish that is slow or that is not 2015. That was a magical year, both in the people who were there and the conditions of the course. It was a perfect storm, no question about it. Now, you have a really great perspective on the race, both from the fact that you've seen it from the front so many times, as well as the fact that you are now ramping up your own coaching business. Mm-hmm. What, from what you see of people as you sort of go by them or as they come at you the other direction, as well as just general impressions of the field, what would be the advice you would give to normal racers, folks who have a day job, who are training, who care deeply about this race? In other words, listeners to this podcast who want to be faster. Is there one thing you would tell them to have a good and hopefully fast day out on the course?
Don't give up. I know that sounds very cliche, but when push comes to shove and you're getting over a cold or you've got work commitments, you just need to stay the course and trust in the process. I think that's my biggest recommendation, because and if you look at my social media on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, it's always me having a great time riding my bike, right? No, I'm sorry, but I just got out of I had a gastrointestinal bug the last 2 days. I've been in bed. You know what? I'm on this podcast right now because I'm going to make it happen if I can make it happen. And I don't usually get bummed out by setbacks. I try to turn it into motivation or look at a positive. And, in the case of trying to, squeeze in a little bit more, it's very similar to just trying to squeeze in what you need to get the job done. And so when I'm working with my athletes, I'm really trying to share that, yes, you need to be flexible, and you need to just give it a whirl in a lot of cases and try to make the workouts go. And if the workout doesn't go, it'll tell you, because your performance will be subpar, your power won't be what it is expected to be. But, a real big part of that is giving it a good college try. And if you stick to a routine and you do most of the work, even in the case of a training plan, if you do most of the work, you'll be a heck of a lot stronger and fitter come race day. And so, yes, none of us come in fully prepared. I could cite 5 different ways that I wasn't well prepared for Leadville last year. And I managed to figure it out. I managed to do it. And you can too.
Great guidance. And once again, this is Jeremiah Bishop. Find him at jeremiahbishop.com. Your Facebook fan page is Jeremiah Bishop. Your Instagram is Jeremiah_Bishop_JB. You got to work on that one. And of course, you're on Twitter at Jeremiah Bishop. And we'll have all of that in the show notes. Jeremiah, looking forward to seeing what you got up your sleeve in 2019, both in Leadville and elsewhere.
All right, super. Well, thanks a bunch. And thanks to all the people out there. Give it your best and good luck. And we'll see you at Leadville.
That could have been an hour-long interview, Fatty. After our talk with Jeremiah, we talked for another 20 minutes on Leadville bike technology. 3 geeks there, deep in conversation.
Yeah, I was super bummed we didn't just keep on recording. Our listeners would have loved that.
The good news, though, is Jeremiah's let us know he'd be happy to have a Leadville gear conversation. He's tried a lot of stuff, and It doesn't take much to get him talking about it.
Yeah, and we never get tired of talking about gear on this show either. So we're looking forward to having him back on the program.
Mm-hmm.
So Hadi, speaking of gear, have I told you about the new bike I am building for the race season this year?
You may have, but I've got bikes too. I have to think about them a lot.
Yeah. So this one's going to stand out, I promise. I'm going back to hardtail for this year, and I'm building a Specialized Epic hardtail, super light, super fast bike. And when you are building a nice bike, you sweat over every little component.
Yeah, I have a credit card bill and a garage full of bike parts to prove that theory.
Yeah, this time it's not really like that for me, though. Last year I had such a great experience with the Shimano XT Di2 drivetrain and XT brakes that really the only thing I'm sweating this year as I'm building a new bike is whether to just sort of straight across move everything over from my felt hardtail over to my new Specialized Epic hardtail, or to build it up with a new 12-speed XTR.
Deliberations.
Oh, such a hard choice.
You must decide then, do you want the ease of electronic shifting from Shimano's XT Di2 drivetrain or the range offered by the 12-speed XTR?
That is exactly what is keeping me up at night. It's kind of nice, though, I have to say, to have such a hard choice between two such really great choices.
Mm-hmm. Well, I imagine this conversation is going to be a part of this show until you get fairly close to race day. No bad choice here, really, though. XTR or XT, Di2 or manual, and of course, the best brakes on the market. Go to bikeshimano.com for more. We will also have a link at leadville100podcast.com.
One of the things we are most excited about this second season of the Leadville podcast is a focus on nutrition. Anyone who's ever done this race knows it is every bit as important a part of how well you do in the Leadville 100 as how hard you train or how good of a bike you have. How well you fuel yourself while training and racing is so critical. Maybe more critical than anything else. How well you've acclimated to altitude, how nicely set up your gear is. Honestly, anything.
I know. One of my favorite Fatty quotes is Leadville is a eating and drinking contest, and you got to keep that in mind. I think, Fatty, both you and I have had bad stomach days on race day, Fatty, and anyone who's ever bonked or barfed knows how seriously that can impact a day that you thought was going to be great. So we're excited to bring Roxanne Vogel on as a regular contributor to our show, as she's going to be our nutrition expert.
Yeah, Roxanne is the sports nutritionist at GU Energy Labs in Berkeley, California. She works with sponsored and elite athletes to improve their event performance and their athletic longevity through custom nutrition planning and consultation. Roxanne holds her master's in exercise and sports nutrition and is a certified exercise physiologist. Roxanne Vogel, welcome to the Leadville podcast. It is so great to have you here.
Hey, Fatty. Thank you for having me on. I'm really excited.
So I kind of need an intervention or help or something. I was super fit last August. You'll have to take my word for it. And then came September, and I'm riding for fun, and it's getting colder and darker, and I'm not riding as much. And then Thanksgiving, and then Christmas, and then New Year's. And now I'm too fat for my fat pants. So I am freaking out about spring and the next race season. So, my question for you is help?
Right. Yeah. So the old holiday weight gain story. So not uncommon. I hear this every single year. And, even our elite athletes go through similar things in the off season. But I think the first most important thing to realize is it doesn't happen overnight, right? So your suit didn't get too tight from just one meal or one day of overeating. It took you a good few weeks or a few months to get to that point. So the first thing I always want to make people aware of is that you need to be realistic in how long it's going to take to undo some of that damage, and it's not going to happen overnight. Right. So that's basically the number one kind of thing to be aware of. Is just you got to be realistic with these things. But then once you kind of accept that, you need to also commit to making a change and then stick with it for at least a couple weeks, right? Like you got to give it a good couple weeks. I like to see 30 days if possible. They say it takes 30 days to make any habit stick. So finding a window of time that you can say, all right, for this amount of time, I'm going to make these decisions at least 80 to 90% of the time.
That actually gets to a question/problem that I have, which is I am generally good about whatever diet or plan that I have up until about, until the weekend or until 9 p.m. It's like I am good most of the time. And then I will, discombobulate and, eat everything in the house. And, then it's like, I've ruined it. For when you have those slip ups, that 10% where you're being non-compliant, to use your term. How much damage are you doing? What is a backslide a really big deal?
A backslide's not a big deal if it's, again, like 10, maybe 20% of the time. When it becomes more than that, and it's just kind of like you keep making those same decisions, like to eat the extra serving of bread at dinner or, have those cookies before you go to bed, that's when it becomes a problem. So the other thing I like to do is really focus on like 2 or 3 things that you're going to make sure that you stick to during your kind of commitment period. So a lot of times I'll have people write them down or make a checklist each day to see if they've hit those goals. So say, for instance, they want to make sure they get 20 grams of protein each meal. So they make a checklist for each time they hit 20 grams of protein, something like that. It helps keep you kind of honest with yourself. And so you can see the progress you're making. And that actually helps reinforce making good decisions going forward. If you can see like, oh, I was compliant for this many days already, I might as well just stick to it for the next 5 days. And then
Roxanne, another confession I'm sure Fatty would love to make to you, instead I'll make it, is that every year he likes to hold a weight loss competition. He does this by inviting several of his friends, myself not included, to engage in this weekly weigh-in. And the goal is to obviously lose as much weight as possible. And in the end, the winner gets money or pride or I don't know what. Now, I don't know what your opinion is on weight loss competitions, and I'm not asking you to weigh in, no pun intended. You can if you like. But give us some safe strategies to lose weight and lose it quickly.
Right. I love that you do a weight loss challenge, by the way, Fatty. That's awesome. I want to know what the prize is. But yeah, so I think it's all in good fun if you want to do weight loss challenge or something like that at work, like just being realistic about it, obviously, is number one. But there are some ways that you can kind of shed the pounds a little more quickly, or at least temporarily if you need to. Number one, first and foremost, is just drink more water. And it seems really simple and intuitive, but most people actually don't drink that much water throughout the day, or they kind of get distracted and don't really pay attention to how much they're drinking. But if you pay attention, try to get like 3 liters a day. So if you think of those bottles of water that you get that are, like a Aquafina or whatever the brand is, those are about a half liter each. So like 6 of those a day. Just pound the water.
All right, Roxanne, our weight loss strategy needs more than water, though, correct?
Right.
That's true.
Right. So aside from that, so that's number one. That'll help just kind of keep you feeling full, help with mental clarity, things like that, just help you feel better in general. But also, I would say up your protein intake, because protein actually helps keep you feeling full. And it's also, if you think of how much it costs for your body to metabolize nutrients. And this is getting a little nerdy and sciencey, but protein is more expensive, so to speak, than either fat or carbohydrate. So it actually takes more calories, it takes more energy to break down protein than it does carbohydrates or fat. So you're kind of getting like a lower net intake of calories when you're eating protein. So that's something that most people don't really know. But so on the one hand, it keeps you fuller. And on the other hand, it actually is, making your metabolism work harder. So you're burning more calories when you're eating protein than either carbohydrates or fat. So it's like a win-win. So that's another great one. The other thing is watching out for lots of salt in the diet. When you eat lots of high sodium things, so like canned goods or lunch meats, soups, or even like ketchup or mustard, condiments have tons of sodium and you got to look at the label. Those can help you actually hold on to water, which we don't want, right? So looking for things that say no salt added on them, or just avoiding kind of processed foods altogether and choosing just fresh produce or things from the butcher counter, that will help you, not retain water. And then you can drop those water weight pounds quickly too.
Mm-hmm. What about our carbs then? I mean, we obviously need some of those to move forward in life on. How do we address those?
Right. Well, okay, so that's debatable. Some people will say you don't need carbs, and I've definitely heard that side of the story. But there's no need to cut out all of your carbs necessarily. So if you're used to eating kind of carbs with each meal, you have like your cereal for breakfast and your sandwich for lunch and your rice for dinner, maybe consider starting to cut back a little bit. So maybe eliminating your starch at dinner, or maybe eliminating 2 of your starch servings. So maybe switching to a salad for lunch and then just a protein and vegetable for dinner. But cutting out some of those starchy grains will help you kind of drop pounds a little more quickly, because carbohydrates actually do retain some water with them when they're stored in your muscles. So that will help you lose water weight and weight, but it is kind of a quick and dirty trick to lose a couple pounds as well.
Yeah, I know that just last week, as I started this diet, I have more or less eliminated carbs except for during hard workout efforts. And yeah, the first week you lose like 4 pounds. Of course, that doesn't work for the rest of the weeks, unfortunately, or I'd be done next month. But yeah, it makes a difference. But you have to change that out for more proteins, and a lot of people will say more fat. So where do you stand on the balancing out protein with fat idea?
Yeah, and that's a very timely and kind of on-trend phenomena. I guess the whole ketogenic or low carb, high fat diet. And certainly a lot of people do very well on those types of diets, especially from like a weight loss standpoint. And I would say, like, as long as you're able to maintain your performance levels with the amount of carbohydrate you're taking in, there's no reason to avoid fats. Like that's a little bit old school, is the whole low fat mentality. And, even nowadays it's becoming more appreciated that healthy fats are a great part of any healthy diet. So I would say a lot of times looking for kind of like a 1-to-1 ratio of like protein to carb. That's one way to go about it. And then the rest of your diet is fat. So say you eat 20 grams of protein with a meal, then you can have 20 grams of carbs with the meal, and then a healthy fat serving. So maybe like some olive oil drizzled over your salad greens or something like that. But yeah, I don't think there's any reason to be afraid of fats.
Mm-hmm. Let's do two things now, Roxanne. The beginning of the day and the end of the day. So the beginning of the day, a lot of us go for caffeinated beverages, whether that be tea or coffee. I'm assuming we were talking about ergogenics here. I think I'm using the word properly there. And then the end of the day. Take us to the end as well with dinner time. When do we eat? So how soon before dinner time, or rather bedtime, and then what's on the plate for dinner? So breakfast, or either that first drink in the morning and then the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. So first thing in the morning, a lot of people love to have their coffee, their tea, whatnot, and that's all well and good. Honestly, caffeine is not necessarily bad for you. Most people can tolerate a decent amount. It's what you put in it really that becomes the issue. So when you load it up with sugar and creamer and whatever other latte flavored things you have in your fridge, that's when it can add up, right? So I would say, especially, like your green teas are a great choice. Any teas really, but
because why? What do they do?
So it's really good at helping you kind of like burn extra fat calories. So I think the word you were looking for was thermogenic.
Thermogenic.
So
there we go.
Yeah, thermogenic. So it can again help rev your metabolism a little bit, help you burn off a few extra calories. So caffeine does that in general, but teas seem to have extra components that help you do that and also maintain sort of a smoother level of energy. So that black coffee is fine. Again, it's just avoiding putting in a bunch of sugar and other things that can kind of ratchet up the calories.
But those drinks will help you, in other words, kickstart your metabolism or your fat burning a little bit. I mean, they're working for you in this weight loss challenge, if you will, right?
Right, exactly. So the caffeine is really helping you kind of switch on fat burning to some extent, increasing your energy levels, things like that, definitely. And
then the biggest meal of the day, and sometimes our biggest problem, that's dinner. What's the dinner strategy?
Right. So dinner is, for most people, they're going to have some kind of protein. They're going to have some kind of vegetable, hopefully, and then like a big serving of starch. So like, meat sauce on pasta or something like that. The goal here would be to kind of switch that up in proportions. So you really want to focus on getting a good 20 to 30 gram protein serving. So something the size of your hand, like a fillet of fish or chicken breast or whatever it is, even a brick of tofu if you're vegetarian. So making that the primary focus. So focus on protein first, and then filling out the rest of your plate with sort of vegetables. So like a green salad, and then maybe like a side of sauteed potatoes or something like that. Sorry, scratch that part. Side of...
I was going to say mashed potatoes.
Not mashed potatoes.
That's right, with butter.
Yeah, but you just want to focus on filling it out with vegetables and high fiber carbohydrates. So limiting kind of the highly processed starches and grains, and then a healthy fat serving again. So maybe like a little bit of olive oil, some avocado, some nuts or something like that, olives. So really focusing on the protein and the vegetables for dinner. And then the big thing that people have a hard time with is stopping after dinner, right? So they might have dinner and then be like, oh, well, I need dessert. Or 2 hours later, oh, well, I need a snack for my movie that I'm watching on Netflix. Really trying to make dinner the cutoff point, right? So stop eating after dinner and stick to it.
So when should eating stop in relation to bedtime? How many hours?
I mean, I hate to put a number on it, but if you want to be able to fully digest, a few hours. So like 3 hours before bed is reasonable.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's about what I'm doing. I find that is one of the things that really does work. If I essentially, brush my teeth, I'm done eating for the day. Right after dinner, it's around 7 p.m. I'm in bed by 10. I find that I do pretty well. One thing that I have been wondering about is something my sister is doing. Not really so much an athlete, but she's doing, I think it's called the Whole30 diet. And I'm not super familiar with it, but it's one of the things where it's essentially a big detox, a month of detox. Where do you stand on those? Can those jumpstart your weight loss?
Yeah, and I've heard of the Whole30, and while I'm not going to advocate any specific detox diet or commercial cleanse or anything that's on the market, I think in general, so increasing just kind of whole food intake and eliminating processed foods from the diet is going to go a long way. For most people, they'll see kind of immediate and dramatic results once they make a switch like that. If they're, used to eating sort of the standard American diets, Western diets. So yeah, I think any diet that's based on eating more whole foods and less processed foods and things like that is going to help and going to be beneficial. I would be careful of any specific product or something where you're just drinking like one drink or one juice or one smoothie for a full week or a full 2 weeks. Those can be, maybe not getting all of your nutritional bases met.
Well, plus there's the fatigue. You do it for a few days and then you plateau and you get sick of it and you get angry and then you completely fail. It's those kinds of things. They're simply not sustainable. You need to target a diet that you can actually live with.
Right. Absolutely. And, another thing is your body is actually really good at kind of detoxing itself if you just give it a break every once in a while. So if you just stop eating a bunch of junk food and stop drinking so much and give your liver a break, it's really good at doing its job, which is to remove toxins from the body. So that, and then just good old fashioned working up a sweat is another great way to kind of detox. So whether that's from exercising or heat, so going to a sauna or doing hot yoga, something like that, that's a really good way to just kind of remove some of the excess junk from your system.
Mm-hmm. All right, Fatty, some good stuff here, I think. Go ahead, do your little weight loss challenge if you must, but remember, drink some more water, buddy. Maybe up the protein some and cut some of the carbs, as in the starchy carbs, but keep up your vegetables too, okay? And you'll be able to see, and you'll have good skin and everything too on top of it all. Nice. Next time we talk with Roxanne, we're going to talk about fasted, that is fasted, F-A-S-T-E-D, fasted training, not faster, but fasted training. Hey, Fatty, you know what's really cool about going to bike events?
Running into famous people like Jake Pantone from Envy.
Well, how did you know that?
Super smart.
Indeed. Yeah, you are. Indeed. Jake was at the bonk breaker ride I did a few days ago. And so I said to him, hey, Jake. And he said, hey, Hottie. And I said, hey, how about you and I talk about the secret behind your fast, flat-preventing carbon rims? And he said, why, sure.
All right, Leadvillers, I'm here with Jake Pantone of Envy Composites. Envy, of course, a big supporter of the Leadville 100 podcast. We want to thank Envy, of course, for supporting us and lending us a lot of knowledge when it comes to mountain biking. Now, at Leadville, Jake, a lot of people are concerned about getting a flat and preventing a flat, and they'll look at tire choice and sealant, and they'll focus in on that as a way to try and avoid the dreaded flat. But rim choice, wheel choice can make a big difference too?
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, like any endurance race, it's success through marginal attention to the details, right? So those decisions are very important. Tire choice, the sealant, setting everything up properly. And on our end of the spectrum, we feel it's our personal responsibility to develop the rims and the wheel sets that are going to help deliver people to the finish line. And so, the marquee product that I would recommend for people for the Leadville 100 is a product called the M525. And it is a rim that is specifically developed for cross-country racers. And it has a technology on it called the wide hookless bead. So most mountain bike rims these days, nearly all carbon wheels have a hookless bead design. That just means there's not the hook that traditionally held the tube and tire on the rim. So the hookless bead has existed for some time. We have what's called wide hookless bead, which is somewhat of an evolution of hookless beads. And the purpose for that wide hookless bead is that is to prevent pinch flatting. So a lot of people believe that pinch flatting is a thing that sort of ended with tubeless, and it's really far from the reality. With hookless beads and the evolution of carbon rims, that leading edge of the rim became really rigid and sharp effectively. So under a hard impact, the carbon itself would actually slice through the tire. And so we saw this happening across all spectrums of mountain bike disciplines, and we wanted a solution. So we created this wide hookless bead, which creates a wider leading edge or a blunter, softer surface for the rim and tire to bottom, or for the tire to bottom against the rim, and it literally prevents pinch flats. It's simple, but it's those minor details that really separate an NV rim from some of the other options out there.
Well, we'd encourage all Leadvillers lining it up this summer to check out the M-Series rims. They might help you not only go faster, but prevent a flat. And Jake, thanks for supporting the podcast.
Thank you.
And of course, you can learn more about all of Envy's wheels and components, many of which seem like they're made with the Leadville 100 in mind, but which can handle pretty much anything you throw at them. Just go to envy.com. That's ENVE.com.
Best wheels in the industry, Hottie, no lie. There's a reason you and I both ride them. Check them out. Get them for yourself. They are seriously the most important upgrade you can make on your Leadville ride. A set of M525s at ENVE.com.
All right, now let's go to training tips with TrainerRoad's coach, Jonathan Lee.
Yeah, I am super excited to have Jonathan back for another season of the Leadville podcast, Hottie. This guy, along with other super nerds at TrainerRoad, just takes his training and his racing so seriously. And this year he made it through the lottery, I should say, for the Leadville 100. So he is personally invested in his doing well, which means in our doing well. I'm excited to have him help me and our listeners get prepared as possible for race day. Jonathan, welcome back. It's great to have you here for another season of the Leadville podcast.
Thanks. It's good to be here. It's specifically apropos this year because I'll actually, last year I went as a spectator. This year I am actually going to be racing it. So happy to be here.
It's January, snow's on the ground, at least in certain parts of the country, and training it at least for me, is kind of slowed down. What should we be doing right now?
Yeah, in terms of what you should be doing, this is really when things should start to be winding up, or I should say picking up for you. And the reason for that is, you've got a whole lot of time to build for this sort of race, but you don't want to procrastinate any of that. But even before the training, you can start that and start picking into things. But I really think that this is the time where you should look back at previous years, whether you've done Leadville or not, and you should really look at, from a coaching perspective, we call this an annual review, but it's where you look at your strengths, weaknesses, and limiters that you encountered in previous years, and then how you're going to adjust those for Leadville specifically.
Jonathan, everyone needs base this time of year, right? So we're working on base, aren't we? And in the process, looking at what we're going to need or what our weak points are.
Yeah, that's exactly it. We're multitasking in this respect. So you're spending more time on the bike. You're getting back into that. You're probably revisiting a few things that, let's say, for example, you noticed that last year you had some knee pain and you're trying to fix those twinges. Maybe it's time to focus on some gym work and then some simple fundamentals while you're spending more time on the bike working on base work right now. But in terms of evaluating the strengths and the weaknesses and everything else, the real thing is you need to look at your performance and you need to see where your performances were, I guess, how they fell, or how the cards fell, so to speak, on the previous performances. And then you need to look at what you need to do to either change the athlete that you were for the better, or just prepare yourself more appropriately for the demands of Leadville. It's kind of interesting. I mean, as athletes, we have a lot of strengths and we have a lot of weaknesses, but just because you have a weakness doesn't mean that it's a limiter on race day. And what I mean by that is, I could be an absolutely terrible swimmer, for example, but since I don't do triathlon, that really doesn't matter. It's a weakness, but it's not a limiter because that doesn't matter on race day. So for something like Leadville, if you can't do, 10 efforts at about 150% of your FTP, each 30 seconds long, and with only 15 seconds break in between, it really doesn't matter that much. It's not going to be a limiter on race day for a course that has such, steady state demands on it. So it's really looking at, where you fell apart in your races last year, where things came unhinged or where your training came unhinged, looking and trying to find why that happened and then say, okay, is that going to matter on race day? And if it does, setting some plans around how to address that. So then hopefully Leadville can be more successful for you.
I don't know about you, Hottie. I am pretty good at assessing where I fall down. I am an incredibly self-critical person. I have a rough time if you were to say, what are your strengths, Eldon? I would say, I don't know, I'm an okay climber, I guess. For a fat guy, I'm fast uphill. How do you find your strengths? How do you assess those?
Yeah, so specificity matters, first of all. So like you said, I guess I'm a good climber. It's pretty vague because a lot of things go into your performance in terms of making you a good climber. So I view it like this. Basically, sit back, and you don't have to, say 10 weaknesses, 10 strengths. It doesn't have to be anything like that. It can just be a few. It can just be a couple. It could even just be one. But sit back and look and say, okay, where do I not feel challenged in a race, particularly? Or in other spots, say, where do I feel particularly challenged, or where do I notice the group riding away from me? And in those scenarios, that's where you'd want to identify that. And it may be performance stuff on the bike. It may be nutrition. It could be technical ability, any different, a large number of things. But really, that's where you want to look at is success points and failure points from previous races. And even though it may be difficult for us to be, to look back and not be overly critical of ourselves, it's very important for you to sit back and recognize what you do well, because there's probably some sort of a process that you implemented to become good at that specific thing that you can then apply to the weaknesses. So it's really, once you identify where your strengths are and your weaknesses are, then see if those are going to be applicable for the race that you have planned, which in this case, it's Leadville, right? And then if you have those laid out, you can then start to formulate training around it, that sort of thing. So for me, I'll just share my personal example here. I know that I'm two things that are going to prove limiters for me. They're weaknesses that will prove limiters at Leadville are going to be steady state power. It's never been a strength of mine. However, in the past, I have focused on it, and it does come around, even though I thought I was terrible at it forever. It's actually not too bad. But then the other side of things is I'm really bad at keeping up on my nutrition. So with those two things, I think that's probably, for me, those are the limiters that I'm going to focus on. I know that technical ability, I'd say that's a plus, but that's not going to be strained in this case. So yeah, that's the way to do it. And if you do that, then you're going to have a clear idea of exactly what you need to work on throughout your training all the way leading up to Leadville.
All right, I think I've got it then. Get on your bike, folks. Ride it. You're going to have to ride it a bunch probably this time of year, or your trainer, whatever it is. But be thinking about, what are my weak spots, and whether or not that weak spot's going to hurt you on Leadville race day. All right, Jonathan, look forward to getting back with you next time, where we'll talk about picking the right type of training plan. For more, check out TrainerRoad.com for in-depth training plans and info, and you'll find the TrainerRoad podcast there too.
Yep, I never miss an episode. Hottie, before we close this show, I have to make a confession. With the cold here in Utah, I am not riding my bike to work ever. In fact, the only time I'm getting on a bike at all right now is when I check out my new fat bike. But, I am still using Banjo Brother gear every single day. That is my canvas cycling rucksack. It's the best commuter bag I have ever owned, even when I am being way too much of a fair weather rider to actually take it outside. This thing is cavernous. It easily holds all my workout clothes, and for the company gym where I'm doing some of my workouts, it holds my computer, it holds my tablet, my phone, my lunch, everything. And with the leather straps and the canvas look, you wouldn't really think it's very weatherproof or waterproof, but I tell you, nothing gets wet in that thing. It is just a really great pack.
Hey, look, I'm getting my bike commuting in, so if you feel like you're not putting the backpack to use, buddy, go ahead. You can send it out my way. I'll be happy to roll it around Los Angeles.
Get your own, man. I am not giving this thing up. But when you get your own, you will find it is a bargain at $75. And of course, our listeners get an even better deal when they use the Fatty Favorites code. Banjo Brothers is tough, practical, and affordable. It's based in Minneapolis and has been in business since 2003, and they are just really good guys. To get that 15% off on your order, go to banjobrothers.com/fatty-favorites.
Okay, that's going to do it for this episode of the Leadville 100 podcast presented by Floyd's of Leadville. If you like our little show here, give us a 5-star rating and review us over at Apple Podcasts. It'll just help others who've caught this endurance cycling bug find us. Meanwhile, if you have ideas or questions for us, head to the Leadville100podcast.com comment section and get in touch.
Yep. And also follow me on Twitter. I am at Fat Cyclist. Find both of us on Facebook, where it's just us by our names, or you can also find us where we are super active in the Leadville 100 MTB participants group.
Good luck in your training. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you at the start line.
It's coming sooner than you think, folks.